Welcome, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Myra Bridgeforth, and I am the co-creator, leader of the Crooked Steeple Literary Festival. We are so glad you are here. We've been so excited about gathering to learn more about this book because so many of us have loved it from the beginning of last year when we were hoping she would be here, and now she's here, so we're so glad. We're glad that you're spending your Saturday afternoon. We're glad that you're spending your Saturday afternoon with us. This is the third season, and we've discovered what I think I already knew before, but that reading books and talking about books is a sacred thing. Getting together with other people in the room to hear the author talk about their creative process in writing the book is quite a gift to ourselves and to each other. Thank you for joining us. Look around at the edges and see the people, and you maybe have already noticed them, that have on white shirts and red bandanas. If you need help figuring out where the bathroom is or any other kind of help or questions, find one of them. Some of you picked up 3x5 cards when you came in, which will be crucial for asking a question of the author today. Raise your hand if you didn't get one and you want one, because one of those folks will give you a card. Once you've written your question, you can either wave to one of them or walk over and hand it to them. After the interview, depending on how much time we have, we will pick out a few of them to ask questions of the author. Now I want to introduce Yenna Wang, who is our new senior pastor at Falls Church Presbyterian Church.
Thank you. Well, hello, neighbors. How are you? I'm glad you guys are here too. My name is Yenna Huang, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to this third season of Crooked Steeple's Literary Festival as FCPC's new senior pastor. As Christians, we are often called the people of the book. The Bible literally means books. And so it is fitting that we host this literary festival to connect with our neighbors through good books and powerful stories that resonate with our lives. Stories are central to our experience as humans. They connect us, helping us to find common bonds. For 151 years, Falls Church Presbyterian Church has been sharing a variety of stories, really. Divine stories of God's interactions with us, human stories of faith, and moments where God's presence reveals itself in and through us. We tell stories to inspire, to heal, to encourage one another to live with hope, faith, joy, and love, especially when life's challenges make it hard to remember these things on our own. We're especially honored to have esteemed author Meredith Hall with us today at the end of this very stressful week for many. It is really good to be together in this space. Let's set aside our worries and differences and listen as she shares her story of grief, compassion, and atonement. Stories that reminds us of the things that are truly important and stories that connect us. Finally, we are committed to offer events like this free of charge so that many people can participate without financial barriers. We are grateful to those who have already donated, including the National Capital Presbytery, whose generous grant has made this event possible. If you're able to contribute, your support will be greatly appreciated. And if not, we're just glad you're here. And for those who are interested in making a larger donation to help sustain this program, please speak with Anne or Myra. So with that, thank you.
Bard's Alley Bookshop in Vienna is our book-selling partner for this event, and we're so grateful to them for their support and help. And please check out, if you're from around here, please check out Bard's Alley. It's on Church Street in Vienna. I live in Vienna, and I can tell you it is really a treasure to spend your afternoon on that historic street and also have a great bookstore. Amy Woolsey is in the back corner, and she has the books to sell today, and you can buy a copy of Beneficence and get your books signed. Okay, so let me introduce Meredith Hall to you. Meredith Hall is a professor emeritus at the University of New Hampshire, and she's the author of the best-selling New York Times memoir, Without a Map, which I'm in the middle of reading, which is really quite remarkable. We're here today to talk about Beneficence, her novel, and we're so honored to have you with us today. When Anne Mugler and I were first introduced to Beneficence last year, we both read it and fell in love. I really am such a word nerd, a sentence nerd, but I would read a paragraph and then I would have to stop and go back and read the paragraph again, and I think, how did she do that? The book is about, I think it's about family, loving each other, working very hard to make a life, and enjoying doing it when tragedy strikes. And then they have to find a way, slowly and painfully, to a kind of wounded redemption. It is very beautiful. Anne Mugler is our interviewer today. Anne and I came up with the idea for the Literary Festival 4 years ago, and now we spend an inordinate amount of time planning and executing these wonderful days. It is one of my favorite things to do in my life. She's our interviewer today. Anne is a social worker and a psychotherapist. She is a beautiful poet. She's a gifted rug hooker, mother, grandmother, and the kind of friend who makes me a better person just because I spend so much time with her. Here at FCPC, she's the chair of the spiritual growth team who so generously supports us with energetic enthusiasm and money. Please join me in welcoming Meredith Hall and Anne Mugler to the Crooked Steeple stage.
Well, yay, we're going to get to do this. Meredith, welcome. I have read your book 3 times, and each time I do, I never get tired of it, and I always learn something I didn't see before, and I just really love the book. And so do others. There are probably half a dozen book clubs represented in this audience. Some people have told me that this was the best book they read in their club. And some other people have told me that this was a book they talked longer about than other books. And then I also have a friend who just told me that she started to read it and then she couldn't stop and she read it all night long. So tell us a little bit about the story and how it came to you.
Hello everybody. Thank you very much. I'm truly honored to be here. This is a story about a family on a Maine farm. I'm from Maine, and they are, I think, in many ways, a remarkable family. They're a very well integrated family. There are 3 children, Sonny, Dodie, and Beston, oldest to youngest. And this dairy farm has come to top the father from generations in his family. He's the 5th generation to run this farm. And the farm had really been run down. By the time he took it over in 1945, it really was suffering. And he and his wife, Doris, his new bride, made the decision to take on the farm. And so much of the book is focused on their life on the farm, their daily life and what the work is and what the challenges and demands are, that constant work, and also the joy. It's a very beautiful place. This area of Maine that I modeled the farm on is very, very beautiful. And so they understand that they live in that beauty. But this is also a family that gets hit out of the blue by a tragedy. And so the book ultimately becomes a study of how this family moves through tremendous shock and sorrow and guilt, and really wobbles as it makes its effort to find themselves again as a family. So when I started this book, I had very little idea of what it was going to be. I thought that there was going to be a woman who I pictured being Doris, who was going to tell these stories, and she was on the farm. And I didn't really understand at the beginning what was going to happen on the farm, but when it came to me, I realized, oh, this tragedy is going to happen, and the husband is going to be really a failure. He's going to be a bad guy. He pretty much walks on it. And he's going to behave selfishly, and that selfishness will do terrible harm. So I imagined this man who became Tup as really my bad guy in this story. And I started writing. I'm actually going to read today from the very first pages of the book. I assumed that Doris would tell this story, and it turns out that Doris hands the story off to Dodie, the middle child, the girl, and Tup in rounds throughout the book. They speak in that same round over and over and over again. Doris starts talking, and the strangest thing started happening. Within pages of the book, I understood that Doris not only was very much in love with Tup, but she liked him and admired him and trusted him, and that there was something very, very remarkable in their relationship. And I had to rethink Tup. What I thought was going to happen wasn't going to happen at all. So.
Thanks. I loved how you structured it with very linear and clear. Could you say something about that? You started to mention it, the three characters, and how you decided to do that.
So there are two aspects about the organization. One is this round of Doris speaking first, then Dodie, then Tup, that carries without break front to back in the book. But I also made the decision, as I went along, I understood that this was going to play out over a couple decades, 1945 to 1965. And I don't like books. I love books that make me do a lot of intellectual and emotional work, but I don't like books that make me try to figure out where I am and what's going on. I don't enjoy it. I want my feet on the ground. And so I was very clear. There are 4 sections of the book before that describes this beautiful life that they live during, which is a very short section in very short voices. And then after, which is the longest section in the book, and a shortish section at the end called Here, where they are finally getting their feet on the ground again. So the book has these 3 voices, it has these 4 sections, and every section is dated. You know exactly how much time has elapsed since the last time we listened to the people. So, and I don't necessarily think that I or writers need to write chronologically, but it worked for me. It was complicated to have these 3 voices. Do you know, this was my first novel, and my memoir had 1 voice, and I just assumed that's the way I should start this thing. I only was told by an accomplished writer friend after the book was written, you know, you chose the very hardest way to go about this in multiple voices over long periods of time. But it was very organic for me. I found it very helpful to be able to switch and let each person say, well, this is what happened to me. This is in this year that we're talking about, this was my experience, rather than try to have somebody take on a kind of falsely omniscient sense of it. So I apparently waded into some real trouble as a writer, but it worked fine for me. So.
Would you read a little bit, please? Thank you.
So I'm just going to read directly from the opening. In that way, for people who haven't read the book, there's nothing you don't know. Everybody is learning the same thing at the same time. So this is Dora speaking. She's the wife and mother, and it's 1947. Every morning early, when Tup and I get up to start our chores, the whole house still quiet and the children asleep, I turn and pull the bed together, tugging at the sheets to make them tight and smooth. They are warm with our heat. I slide my hand across the place my husband slept, drawing the blankets up and closing in the warmth, like a memory of us, until night comes when we will lie down together again. Our room has big windows on the back of the house, looking out on the rear pasture and the creek running through it. It is very nice to stand first thing every morning, looking out over the land. The trees along the hayfields look like ghosts some summer mornings when the ground fog hugs the warm earth. And then the mist slowly drifts up and away, so that by the time I am doing breakfast dishes, the sun makes sharp shadows of the fence wire, like long, neat stitches binding us to this place. Tup and I have enough sense to know that we are blessed people. You cannot know what will come. Once, when Sonny and Dodie were just toddlers, both of them locked themselves in the milk room by mistake. Tup was busy in the north pasture. I could hear the tractor in the distance working. That must have been the year he bought the new tractor, 1938. And I was the one who was supposed to keep an eye on the children. I always did. I learned as soon as Sonny was born that when you have a child, your own life diminishes to just about nothing, and willingly so. Growing up, you are so full of dreams of what your life will be and how you will use all those years that sit like a promise, and always it is you at the center. And then you get married, and those dreams change, but still you have big ideas about it all. Maybe the farm will extend, or you will have enough money to take the train to Sarasota one winter, or you will be paid by folks to cut and sew dresses and skirts you've learned how to copy from the magazines. You can't ever know what will come. You meet a man and marry him and find out whether you made a good choice or not. If you did, you love each other and work hard, and then you have your first baby, and whatever it was you ever dreamed about changes the first time you hold him and feed him and watch him study your face. Sonny came when I was 19 years old, and I forgot forever any of those things I had ever thought I wanted. I felt as if I were God, making such a good world for our children. When Sonny came, and then Dodie, and later Beston, I was willing to leave the life Tup and I had and let my children take that place. I am more than willing. So that morning, the children were out back with me while I hung out the clothes. This was before Beston was born, and about the last year before we got the washer. I heated water on the wood stove in the kitchen and lugged it out to the back dooryard and did the washing on the pump platform. The kids liked laundry day. It was all play for them, dipping little cups into the water and pouring it out on the dry gravel. On a warm morning, you could watch the water disappear like a stain from cloth. I pumped cold water for rinsing and poured it into the tub, and Sonny and Dodie would beg me to dump some over their heads, with them shrieking and running away. It was a game we played every laundry day all summer. The kids would get soaked and muddy, so it was all a good morning for them. Well, that day they got bored, I guess, and wandered off without me realizing. I never even noticed they were gone. I had carried the basket of wrung clothes over to the lines and was pinning them up when I suddenly heard nothing but the breeze rustling the wet cloth and the soft sound of the distant tractor. Like a terrible dream, your worst dream, that moment of inattention when you have forgotten for 1 minute that you were the mother, the one whose single purpose it was to keep your children safe, and that awful silence that jolted you back. I remember feeling so helpless, as if I couldn't fix this no matter what I might do. I ran to the kitchen door and then back to the pump, and then turned toward the noise of the tractor, so far off in the field, as if Tup could pluck my children out of the air. I needed Tup to give me a shake and tell me to think. And then I was back inside myself again, and I could say, they can't have gotten to the creek yet, so wherever they are okay. After that, it was just a story like all mothers have, that cold fear when your child takes off from your sight for just long enough to scare you into thinking you have lost him forever, and you know you are a terrible mother who cannot keep your children safe. I called and called, Dodie, Sonny, turning slowly in place so my voice would carry across the whole yard. And then I heard Sonny's little yell from the milk room, Mama, Mama. As scared as I was, I heard the panic children feel when they have moved beyond the reach of their mother's protection. I'm coming, I called, running to the barn. You silly ducks, where are you? I called in a false and cheerful voice to reassure them and to dispel the terror that had caught me, to assert that this was just an incident, a small event Tup and I would laugh over with relief when we shared dinner. I could hear the door to the milkroom rattle, and when I lifted the latch and pushed the door open, my children pressed their tearful faces into my apron, their arms clasped around my legs, the sweet animal smell of fresh milk tumbling out the door around us. My silly ducks, I said, stroking their tight little shoulders and hair wet from our laundry day game. It's all right. But I still remember the sound of my cries out into that sudden silence, and of Tup's tractor off in the north pasture, so far away. I'd like to say about this, Anne and I talked about this earlier. I'd like to say about that, I didn't know yet what was going to happen in this book. And I read it now, think I've just written every part of the story. Tup is off in the tractor, can't hear what's going on. Doris is lost in this traumatic moment in the house. A child is gone, truly gone. And I didn't understand how much of this language was going to come into the story later. It's something I don't truly understand. I can't explain it as a writer, but reading this, I think, oh, you just outlined the whole story right there. I don't know why.
It's really true. It's on the first page.
Yes.
Yeah, right. You know, and yet the center farm is like an Eden. It's bountiful. It has everything that they need. But both parents, as we just read, and Tup too a little bit, have a little bit of foreboding. They get uneasy, but then they bounce back and everything's fine. And indeed, a tragedy does occur. And things fall apart. And now the family's awake to opposites, differences, beauty, ugliness, comfort, harm, loss, love, truth and guilt, sureness and uncertainty, ballast, and then untethering. Can you talk a little bit about how the parents respond to this tragedy, this falling apart?
Say that again, how the parents
respond
to this. Yes, they respond very differently. There's one thing that unites them, I think, two things. Their tremendous sense of shock and loss, and also their guilt. They both carry so much guilt about how this possibly could have happened. Doris moves into what we would now call a profound depression, although I suspect that language, you might know, I suspect that language really wasn't there at that time. And her family suggests that she see a doctor, but she was certain that no doctor could help her with this, so she doesn't do that. Doris moves into a depression that's so profound, it really takes her to the edge of a kind of mental illness. She isolates herself so profoundly, and she's able to speak about how how disconnected she feels, but she's not able to make any moves, even when the children and Top repeatedly try to draw her back. She's just not able to find that outstretched hand and follow it back to herself. Top is ever dutiful to the farm. Top knows his work, and he loses himself in that work, becoming, as he says, his father, finding no joy at all anymore in all the chores and tasks that had really been the lifeblood of the family. And in the end, I think we watch Top suffer so terribly, not only from the loss of his son, but also from the withdrawal of his wife's love. I think he feels it very profoundly, and in turn feels so adrift that he really drifts off the farm into a separate life. It is not sufficient. It doesn't heal him. It doesn't answer his needs, but it gets him away from the tragedy that is living out every day on the farm. Yeah.
This book is about great love and great loss, and then finally redemption, and every member travels a different road. And the thing I was so aware of is how they didn't talk to each other. They didn't talk about the tragedy, and so each one of them makes up that they caused it, and they think the other people think that the other characters think they caused it, and so there's this terribly stuck position that each one has. Could you say a little bit about that and how that? I mean, it goes on for a long time. Yeah.
It does. This situation goes on for a very long time, and I think realistically, the loss of a child is something that is extremely difficult to heal from, and it took this family a long time. Dodie, interestingly, becomes the one person in the family who is able to speak the truth. And over again, she tries to say to her parents, this isn't okay. You must find the strength and the love to come back to these two children, to Beston and me. We need you. We need your parenting. We need your love and your protection. Her parents are not able to respond to that, and they are not able to talk about this. Tup tries to get Doris to talk. Again and again, he approaches her and tries to open that door, but she's not able to do that. Her own guilt and grief are so profound, she recoils from it, and he's trying to chase after that and trying to find a way to connect with her. They end up not in the same bed, and then not in the same room, and not in the same house even at night, as Tup finds his way to this other life. The other role that Dodie plays in all this is that she has to pick up work for her mother, who is not tending to the farm. Her mother tells us that she's doing her necessary chores, which she sees as putting a meal on the table at night. Really, that's it. The children, Dodie gets the lunches together for school, and she ends up taking over the garden and taking over preserving all the food, and takes over. The hen house has always been hers, but now she has to take over broader chores of the seasons. And there's a real fear that she won't be able to finish high school. She's a joyful student. She loves learning. And there's a real fear that she will not be able to both carry this farm and try to rescue it and finish out her school years. So Dodie becomes the one person in this family. She also takes over watching over Beston and trying to provide security to her little brother. All of these are failures on the part of both parents, and she knows it. She's very aware of that.
And then, during this long period, there comes some redemption. I think grief can continue for a lifetime sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
And but sometimes it gets an intervention. And that intervention can shake loose, cutoffs and triangles and shame and guilt. And can you talk a little bit about the role of Daniel, who is actually not part of the family? He's not a blood relative, but he enters this family and he becomes a very important character.
He does become a very important character, and he snuck up on me. I had no idea that he was going to do that. I always joked with close friends while I was writing this book that my characters will not do what I tell them to do. Nobody behaved. Everybody kept surprising me. And Daniel was simply Sonny's friend, and he was in the room when this tragedy happened and was assumedly profoundly changed by witnessing this tragedy. And he disappears from the family for a number of years. He's on the school bus and doesn't speak to Dodie, and Dodie reads that as blame, that Daniel blames her for this and won't speak to her. A couple years later, Daniel surprises her by waiting after school and asking if he can carry her books, and eventually he starts bringing her home. And that brings him back into the world of Dodie and especially Top. And we learn that Daniel does not have a close family, he doesn't have safety at home, and he makes his way back to the centers and to the center farm, which is a good place for him. And ultimately, he and Dodie marry, and Dodie has a lot of reservations about it. Is this a marriage of recompense? Is this somehow built entirely on this loss, this grief, or is it really love? And she makes the decision to make this marriage, and they have a child. So Daniel now has brought a new life and a new grounding to the family, and now here comes Thomas, this child. But it's Daniel who is the one person in this story. Dodie has been trying to do this, but her parents can't hear her. But it's Daniel who shakes up the family at a critical moment, becoming quite very emotional when he turns to both Doris and Top and says, "Don't you see, this is a tragedy. You're not guilty. You didn't do this. This is a tragedy. Take it for what it is." And that's the moment in my mind that the story shifts. That's the moment that releases Doris and Top and allows them to start imagining some next step.
Yeah, he really helps the centers learn how to love and accept each other again.
Yeah.
I mean, he's almost a spiritual role.
Yes.
He's a coming.
Yes,
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Can you say something about your writing style? It's very lyrical and beautiful, and I understand that you listen to Gregorian chants as you write. Is that true?
That is absolutely true. When I write, I isolate myself for months and months and months on end, and I do very little reading, and I enter some strange other place when I write. And part of that place is occupied by Gregorian chants for some reason. I started listening to Bach cello, when I first started writing my memoir years before this, and liked it, but it wasn't just right. And I happened across a Gregorian chant and thought, this is it. It's beautiful, it's spiritual. Mm-hmm. I don't understand the words. I don't have to get tangled up with what's being said. And it's the rhythms of the chants are gorgeous, really gorgeous. And so one of my kids made a 7-hour loop of Gregorian chants for me, and I've been listening to it for years, only when I write. If I get up from my desk to go make tea, that goes off. It never accompanies me anywhere. It is only when I sit and write. And what happens now is that I can sit down, get my papers organized, hit that button for the Gregorian chants, and I am gone. It's just gone. I am exactly where I want to be. It has, somehow my brain has learned this is where I make story, and it's where I make language. And I'm sure I had never thought of it until quite recently, but I'm sure that the rhythm. of that, and the solemn, there's a solemnity and a joy to Gregorian chants, and I think that's the right place for me. Yeah.
You said, you're a storyteller, and, one of the reasons, as Yenna said, that we have this literary festival for our community is because we believe in the power of story. We're storytellers ourselves, and of course our faith is bound up in the stories of the Bible. Can you tell us what you believe about stories and their grace?
Yes. Anne and I spoke earlier about this. I did not grow up in a storytelling family, and I mind it. I'm sorry about it. I wish that somebody, parents, grandparents, somebody had been a storyteller. And I'm getting my revenge, I think. This is it. But one of the things I noticed as I wrote this book, it was such intuitive writing, but when I look back and read it now, I can see that each of these three voices, they are storytellers. So not only are they telling you the story always in present tense, each of their sections always opens in present tense, but they are rememberers too. And they're going back. They're constantly telling stories about something that happened. One time we went swimming at the mill pond, and I could see the children's legs white under that tin in water. Story after story after story. If I counted, I'm sure there are, 100, 200 stories in here. And I believe that we are genetically, I think that we evolved to be storytellers, and it is our way of sharing knowledge and sharing emotional needs, spiritual needs, humor, relief. I think that it's through stories that we learn how to live a life, and without stories we're left completely on our own, and we shouldn't be. We shouldn't have to make it up, each one of us, over and over and over again. I look at this group of people and am envious that you are somehow joined, and that this is a place, a spiritual place that says it's through our stories that we join.
How are we doing? Okay, let me ask you another question. So what are you going to write next?
Yeah, the big question. So you may have gathered as I wrote this novel, I had no idea what I was doing when I walked into it. I really had the vaguest sense. This farm, I didn't grow up in a farm. I don't know anything at all about this. I have no knowledge of this farm at all. I've never been here. I've never done this work. I don't know these people. And there was something, once it started forming, it felt like such home to me that I needed to be there. I wanted so much to be part of it. And when I finished writing, actually, I felt a profound sense of homesickness, a really unmistakable sense of loss and homesickness that I had to deal with. It was something I had to reckon with in the months after the book was finished. All of that is to say that I'm in that place again where I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm very interested in Grace. Those of you who have read the book, Grace is the little girl that gets left behind by Tup. And Dodie complains to her father at the end, okay, we all did okay in the end, but Grace didn't. Grace is left out there. And so Grace's story is very interesting to me. And I will tell you, if you have not read my memoir, I had a child when I was 16 years old and was expelled from my family because of it, and the child was given up into adoption. And so this abandoned child is of great interest to me. And I'm wondering, can I write this story without getting too close to my own? I'll also say, I wrote a story about losing a child and the mother going half crazy with it. I didn't know until after the book was out and people were talking to me about it, that that was the story I wrote. I had no idea. I told Anne earlier, I cried and cried and cried for months writing this, and thought that it was pure empathy for Doris, and Tup. But it was a story I knew. At any rate, if I could write Grace's story without tangling too explicitly with mine, true life masquerading as fiction, I think always fails. And so I would need to be very careful of that. So that's a thought. I'm also very interested in Beston. And he's the child in this book who has no voice at all, and a very lovable child. I've been wary all my life of sequels to books and films, and I think, oh, it's just an easy way out. But I'm starting to see, oh, you get so involved, you might want to stay with it. So that's the best answer I can give you right now. I'm muddling around.
Reminds me of Marilyn Robinson's books from Gilead and
Yes.
Lila,
Yes.
and they're very separate books,
Yes.
even though they're about the same.
Picking up the lives
Yeah,
of different places.
pieces,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's-
I know that I can't write The Farm again. The Farm is done. No, none of you will need to go back to this farm. It's done. So.
Do we have questions from the audience? Meredith would have to leave a little early, but we found out her plane is very late leaving. So we aren't under any stress. So people with red bandanas, don't worry anymore.
The good
We were
news
going to have
for-
to get her out of here fast.
The good news for all of us
you
is
look
that
at
I have
them
a
at all?
3-hour flight delay. So
Okay. Okay. Just want to make sure we have. It's just, we like to check first. Boy, you guys wrote a lot of questions. This is really cool. We usually just start.
We've got time, so just.
Yeah, okay. So this story could have been written about my family. Did you know, did you grow up with Doris and Tup? Guess not, huh?
not at all.
Yeah.
No. I met them and I fell in love with them. They're really, really fine people, very interesting people, but I did not know them.
Please say more about the beautiful, sensitive weavings of nature and animals to join with the centers in their experience. Meaning of nature and animals.
So that part is true. I live outdoors a lot and seem to have a profound need for wildness and seek it out. I am from Maine, but followed children out to California, Northern California, and have discovered there an abundance of species and an abundance by population of wildlife that is stunning me. And I pay close attention. I keep notebooks, and I watch, I look, I sit quietly and observe, and the nature is that important to me. So that was something that was, I didn't make a plan about it, but it just got written into the book.
Did you have to do anything when switching among characters so that you could get into the specific viewpoint?
That's a great question. This is why writers, experienced writers, not first novelists, know that 3 voices is very difficult to pull off. The danger, of course, is that they won't be differentiated enough, that they'll blend together and have too much of the same view of the world. But I was, the easiest character for me to write was Dodie, the child. I am also optimistic and energetic and cheerful and love to work, love to help out and get things done. So she was the easy child for me, and I also think that I identified with her peacemaking in the family, her effort to fix the family. I told you that Tup I first imagined as a real bad guy, and I had to do a quick reassessment saying, if Doris loves him and likes him so much, respects him, I have to too. And I had to learn my way into this man. And in the end, not in the end, quickly, just simply fell in love with him. I love Tup. If I had to say who my favorite character is or who my most full character is, I would say it's Tup. Mm-hmm. Doris was a challenge for me. I do not suffer from depression, blessedly. I don't know people, I'm not close to people who do. I have not experienced mental illness or people who have experienced that. So I had to make it up, and I was really, really worried that I would get it wrong. And the move I made was to try to watch what she did and what she said without actually using language that would describe it, because I was very afraid I would get that wrong.
So, in your memoir, you suggest, the memoir, we're moving to that now, I guess. In your memoir, you suggest that one cannot love without grief, and with grief comes wisdom and meaning in life. Is that also your statement summary about your novel Beneficence?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's lovely.
I do believe that difficulty in our lives offers us an opportunity to discover and learn compassion and empathy and love, and a kind of payback for those hard times is that we get to learn something we might not otherwise ever need to learn. And I do think that ultimately compassion and love and hopefully wisdom ultimately come together. This book is named Beneficence. I believe in beneficence. I believe in that goodness.
You sort of talked about this, but this is interesting. Tup's narrative voice in his head is much gentler, empathic, and kind than he verbalizes aloud. Was this a conscious decision you made, and if so, why?
That's a good question, too. You know what? I'm a Yankee. A Yankee farmer has a certain way of speaking. I don't think... Tup is occasionally harsh with the kids and harsh a little bit with Doris, and he regrets it. He's smart enough to wish that he hadn't said things that he had said. But he is a kind and very, very fiercely protective man. And sometimes what he says... I think is received by the people who know and love and trust him as perfectly manageable. But that's a very smart observation.
A little overlap too, but you mentioned this was your first novel after writing a memoir. Which character do you most identify with when it comes to your own relationship response to grief?
Which character in Beneficence? I think actually it would be Dodie, this child. Yeah. I feel compassion for Tup's misbehavior. He really screwed up. He really, really, really made a mess of things. And I feel compassion for that. But I think maybe it is, first of all, uniquely the role of the father and husband in the family who might behave in this way. I hope that I would not be, what do we know?
Yeah.
We don't know. Really, this book, I think ultimately this book is challenging me to answer the question, what would you do under these circumstances? Doris says to us in 2 different points, I believed that I would be strong, I would be wise, I would bring myself. If something like this ever happened, I would handle it perfectly. And she doesn't. She just doesn't. And she's shocked by that. So what do we know? I don't know how I would behave. But Dodie's response, which is to sort of click into this sturdiness and just do it, that's something that I just readily understood.
Excuse me, when you start writing a new book, do you start at the beginning and write to the end, or in the middle, or at the end, or does it just differ book to book?
So writers always astonish me when they say, you know, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote, and then I had 1,000 pages on the floor, and I just went through them, and I put it all together, and here's the book. I mean, chaos, absolute chaos. I can't imagine it. Just not the way I work. This deep place that I go when I write seems to open something to me. And this book, my memoir and this book both, quite literally felt as if the people exist, this situation exists, the place exists, the words exist, and I need to get it. It's there, and I just need to get it. And I started at the beginning and wrote to the end. I stop each day when I write. I intentionally stop mid-paragraph so that I don't have to know where I'm going to start the next morning. I can come into it and I'm right there, and it flows again. I just pick up and move again. I do very, very little rewriting and revising. I might, working 3 or 4 sentences down, go back 8 sentences and rearrange something and come back down. But I'm mostly writing as it appears in this book. The book was never revised. My editor didn't ask for a single change, and this is the book I wrote. So, yeah, it's pretty wonderful. I will tell you, I have had writers whose editors have really stepped into their work saying, well, that's just a lazy editor. Aren't you worried that they let you go out into the world with a book that wasn't finished? I think, well, I need to consider that, I guess. But my editor did not ask for changes.
I have not read your memoir. What are some of your life events that impacted the novel? You've answered that a little bit, but
yeah. Yeah, I suppose, I don't think of this quite directly, a mother and father who behaved very badly and abandoned their child, didn't do what they needed to do with me when I was in trouble. Finding my way over many years to a solid and productive life, interestingly, on a small homestead. It was nothing like this, but keeping sheep and chickens and gardens and having my kids sheep, that's 5 sheep and 6 chickens and gardens, and raising my children in that world. That was very important to me. So how I dug myself out of trouble, I think, was familiar. Yeah.
So we are going to let you go and autograph your books. I know people are waiting to do that. Do you have something else you want to say?
If you bought the book ahead of time and you have it with you, you can, Meredith is going to be at that table back on the left corner, and you can line up. And if you want to purchase Beneficence, Amy is at the table, and so you need to go to that table first. And please also visit the table in the middle, where you can get information about the rest of the season, as well as make a donation if you would like to do that, or get some questions. Please make a note on your calendar that our next, and there are cards that were specially made by Megan, our associate pastor, that are about Crooked Steeple, which you can buy. Please make a note on your calendar that our next festival event is February the 22nd. Amina Lusman Dawson, who is the author of Free Water, but will be with us. Free Water is a Newbery Award-winning children's and young adult novel about slave children who escape the plantation and find their way to a community hiding and living in the dismal swamp on the border of Virginia and North Carolina. It's loosely based on the history of maroon communities in the South. This is a riveting story. Attention grown-ups in the room, bring some younger folks with you when you come to the next one, because we're going to have the front seats available to kids to sit, and we hope that, I just think coming to a literary festival, I didn't go the first one until I was in college, and I remember just thinking this was the coolest thing in the world. And we want kids to have the experience of being able to be with a real writer and be able to ask her questions. So, and I would say, you won't mind reading the book at all. I loved it very much. Blessings to each of you, and please join me in thanking Mary.